Unmute myself. Got it. And then we're going to go ahead and start video. Hello, lovely Facebook agents that are watching this later and maybe recapping it. Just here to tell you we have a full room today. So you're going to hear many voices. We're going to go through things, and we always love seeing you in person. But this is the most attention you'll get the entire time I'm speaking, other than just sharing my screen. So thank you for being here. And we're going to share screen mode. Share. And up. All right, so today, take the light off because that's awkward, right? And let me turn off my little video. Turning off the, or I'll just put my little video down here. All right, so today is going to be really exciting. Today, we're going to talk about creative financing and different ways for sellers to think. You're going to like it because you can use this a lot in the key aspects that you decided you want to be involved in, and for yourself. And I hope it brings out more conversations for you in the marketplace. So when I say creative financing, what do you think?
Like seller carry back, wraparounds.
Okay, cool. So we're going to focus on the carryback aspect and the wrap aspect. But Bree brings a really good point home. Lease options and lease purchases, which are two items that are also extremely risky, because I want to let you know the likelihood of those ever closing is 1 in 10. So usually people, all good intentions, then everybody changes their mind. A great example of how that works. I had this client that I was selling their property once. And once upon a time in a land far, far away called Historic Avondale, and a property that you didn't even know what it was made out of. Like literally, I have no idea to this day what kind of home that actually was. It was kind of like mud and stuff, like just holding it up. And the marble on the one side of the house would roll all the way over to the other side of the house. And I just wondered, what will happen one day? And when I asked for the clue report from the seller, who blew me off until it was time it was due, said, but I don't have insurance on the property. And I thought to myself, and if it burns down, it's over for all of us. And it's very likely it could fall down, burn down, or a lot of other things. Yeah. Well, this buyer took pre-possession of the property. Oh, no. Unauthorized pre-possession, aka was sleeping in her car because her agent did not set proper expectations with her and left the key on the windowsill instead of putting it back in my key box, and moved herself into the property. So as a good listing agent would, and this is, I'll get to the story of why this is why lease purchases and lease options usually don't close. I was being a good realtor at 11 p.m. when I couldn't sleep, and I had about 4 or 5 listings in the Litchfield Park, Goodyear area. And I was like, I'm going to do a drive-by of all of them because I'm awake. Don't do that. Yeah. Just go to bed at 9. And this is the last house I decided to drive by. So it's around 11:45, and I'm driving by and I'm thinking, how could a TV be on in a vacant house? That's empty. Tell me more. And so I sit there in front of this house and I'm thinking, I'm not going to the door. But there is nobody that breaks in a house to add a TV. Like, hey, I'm not going to take the piping. I'm just going to place a TV in it. So I call the other agent and I'm like, would you like to tell me what's going on? And could you please call your client and tell her she needs to leave immediately? Knowing that this poor lady had children in the home. And if I called the police, right, I'm going to terrify this whole family. Absolutely. And it's nothing against the police. It's a uniform with a gun. It scares me too. So anything with a uniform and a gun, I'm like, I'm just sorry. I don't even know what I did. Right. So it's 11:45. I'm like, I can't even believe the other agent answered the phone. I can't even believe I'm doing a drive-by. Last time, by the way, I ever did anything past 8 p.m. And I get this, well, she'll be gone in the morning. I contact my clients by text, like, hey, you awake? We have a situation. My clients tell me to let her be, that they will just let her stay. And I have to advise them that's a bad idea. You have no insurance. The house rolls. Like, we have issues, you know? Well, I just want to let you guys know she never ended up closing. She wouldn't remove her items either. And her answer was, after staying in the house, she spoke to God and God told her not to buy that house. And I said, I would like my own direct line. This is fantastic. Can we verify this conversation? But same thing, when someone lives in a home for a long period of time, it's no longer that excitement of purchasing really dies, or they know they can't qualify. So lease purchases and lease options is a great tactic, Brain. I think we should bring that up in next week's training so you can understand the setup and the discussions around them. But the likelihood of them actually closing, I just want to be very certain with you, is unlikely closing.
You did not want to move back out.
No, she didn't have anywhere to put her stuff because
Adverse possession.
she was
That adverse possession.
no, it's not adverse possession because I caught it fast enough, but it does go back to the landlord tenant act of I have to hold her stuff for a certain amount of time before we could dispose of it. And I was not the property manager, so I had to direct the seller and get them to an attorney, and then eventually ended up getting rid of her stuff. But there's a whole time block there. And it was just really contentious. And you think like blood can boil. Like I was on fire mad. I sold the house 8 times. It eventually did close. But the thing is, like, those kinds of scenarios are real and people do things. And when someone gets into a home, it's amazing to me, prepossession so bad in so many ways. They're like, I decided I don't really want to be here. And I'm like, where was that like a month ago? So just be kind of aware of that, but it's a great thing. What we're talking about today actually changes ownership immediately. So you don't get to just back out and tell me you don't want to live there. If you don't want to live there, you should sell it. Right?
And I have a great realtor.
I know several. I know 385 great realtors.
Why they put it is allowed. When it shouldn't.
It's not against the law. It's just the seller needs to know. That's why it's good to have a professional like us. Let's talk about the pros. Let's talk about the cons. And I will tell you all day long, when it comes to prepossession, there's a much larger list of cons than there are pros. So, that's what we're going to go over, but we have one new person at the table today, Ileana. So we're going to go ahead and go down the row and introduce ourselves. And Susan, why don't we start with you?
Susan Lane with Rock Title.
Michael Strain.
Ileana Dodge, I'm the new. Welcome. And Kathy Van Fenton. Jenna Pelter. Brianna Kruger with Rock Title.
Dave Coquette with Wilson Weber.
Was in the comment, girl, too long.
I just said that.
Wendy
because
Blaine.
I think it's hard.
Yeah, but she
Wendy
continues it. And Mandy
I
needs.
thought we were doing the.
So what's fun? Yeah, I was gonna say, like last time, building on the story, right? Like keep the story flowing. So we did improv upstairs. Thank you, Bri and Susan, for being part of it. And helping co-sponsor that event. It was absolutely amazing. And what we were talking about was communications and talking on your toes, keeping the story going, being fun, we have to be a little more realistic in real estate than we are in improv, but it was awesome. And thank you. Like half of this table went, well, more than half of this table went. So good times.
It's a great group.
Can you take one and pass them around? So, and then you take one of these and pass them the other way. And give me one of those, please. And you get to share with me. It's absolutely lovely. So what we're going to go over today, and when I get those all passed around, I will start the next one. No, they are not the same. So switchy doory.
You got the hard job.
Yeah, yeah, they do. They look the same, don't they? And I'm going to show you some differences. Yeah, so it should just be one left for him. And one left for you. I did exactly the right number. Okay, now Michael, you start this one and everybody should receive one.
Okay.
Okay.
Good then.
I think this is the same, right?
You should have two at this time.
You should have 2 gold and 1 silver.
No, don't say that. These are just
Wait,
paper.
should I?
You should have 2
There
documents.
we go, we're good.
Is it-
I think we're
okay.
Yep. Okay,
And
and by the
I-
time we're done passing things around the table, we shall all have, what are you doing? You keep one. 3 documents. Drink that coffee, Michael, drink it.
There we go. All right.
Okay, so you see how confusing this is from the very beginning? Carry back land is not for the faint of heart. There are 3 different seller financing addendums created for you through the Arizona Association of Realtors that are found on your SkySlip forms or transaction desk. So that is how in-depth and how hard you have to think, because they all kind of look alike. Two, the cover pages look,
You don't get one, we gotta share.
okay, there should have been 10. I don't know what happened, but you guys can share for a second. I'll make you one later. You found, okay. So knowing that carrybacks are this difficult, this is why we have an extra one. Hey, pass that one down to Wendy, guys. This is why you're coming to class today, because carrybacks are back. Hardcore. Can I tell you, can anybody share with me the difference between a wrap and a carryback?
Way back.
Yeah, no, that's-
Oh, wait,
The
Kim.
seller holds they borrow
I know.
it from the seller, right?
Mhm.
And a wrap would be the new buyer takes over
Oh,
the
yeah,
loan,
that's right.
right?
But in what sense are they taking over the loan? Because does the loan stay in the seller's name, or does the loan convey to the buyer?
I think it might
In
stay-
wrap.
stay in, I think it stays with the seller.
So I love where Kathy's mind's going. You're like totally on the right track, Kathy, which is the carryback is just the seller's carrying the note, where a wrap is you're wrapping something that you own. But a couple of key elements are different in what you described, but you're totally on the right track. And then Dave, who does that original note stay with?
with
In
the-
a wrap.
in a wrap, okay, so carry back is definitely, I think, the seller, a wrap. gosh, I can't remember.
Okay, a carryback, number one, a carryback is only possible when the home is paid in full. So there is no mortgage left on the table. So if I owe $150,000 on a house I'm selling for $550,000, the buyer would actually have to come in with enough money to cover closing costs as well as my first being paid in full to do a carryback. If my first wasn't being paid in full, that is called a wrap. Because that means the first loan, that 150,000 is going to stay in my name as Mandy Neat. But Joe now owns the house. Joe, if there's a Joe out there watching this, you are being utilized. Joe now owns the house. And if Joe's ever late and I miss a payment, they're going to notice that I no longer own this house. And that note that I wrapped around, I'm getting paid based on the 550 purchase, enough to carry this note. But if Joe misses and I miss this payment and that bank notices that, this can all be called due and payable. And therefore the whole home could be foreclosed on, no matter how much buyer A has put into it, because I did not have that assumed and I did not disclose it to the bank. And if you disclose it to the bank will say, then assume the note, right? That's no longer a wrap, assume the note. But why is Joe doing the carryback? Joe's probably doing the carryback to avoid getting that mortgage or can't qualify at this time for an actual traditional mortgage. Might have a lot of cash flow. How many of you have ever seen a buyer have tons of cash flow talk, I'm a millionaire, but yet no one will finance them?
Qualification, I have tons of 1099 people are like that. They're not qualified for a loan, but they have a big tax.
Big, yeah, cash, but their assets, everything they're going on is usually long-term assets, and quick assets is what lending needs to see. So a lender needs to see that something is cashing out every month that they can pay that note. And a quick asset is something you can go from being on paper to being in your pocket within a 30-day span. So that's why some people are like, well, I'm a millionaire. I own 6 farms and they're worth X. Well, what good is that if I don't have a monthly income from the 6 farms, right? If it's all being held within the farm. So that's why some people will go carryback and some people will go wrap. But what I need you to know is on a wrap, which I will not teach you how to do ever, is the biggest risk to both parties, because they both can lose everything in an instant. Carla?
I heard in rep also, mortgage required if you change the insurance, the homeowner's insurance on your name or on the new owner's name, that's when they.
That's another way to catch it.
There's a number of ways for them to catch it, and only certain types of loans can be wrapped. And so there are a number of things when somebody comes in and says, we're gonna do a wrap. My eyes roll back in my head and like, oh, but we could do them, but we have to take a look at we have to have the original note. And we have to look at all of these things because we have to determine whether or not it can be wrapped and make sure that it is not negatively amortized, so it's not going to cause a negative amortization. And you're right, there is a big risk, which is why they always should have account servicing where the payment is made and then sent.
So way back, like in the 90s.
So common.
So yeah, in fact, late 80s, it was crazy because you could do fully assumable no qual loans. That's how I bought my first house. It was a VA loan. And we did a seller carryback. There was no, I mean, the laws must have been completely different.
Well, a carryback again is different than a wrap,
I
right?
can do a wrap, yeah.
Yeah, a carryback is seller financing, which I'm teaching you today.
Right,
A wrap is having that note that's still held in that original seller's name, where the bank is like, hey, if there's any kind of changes, we need to be aware. And if we're not, we're able to call the whole amount due and payable immediately. And say that that amount that you wrapped is $300,000. Now, I know Jenna has it in the bank, but like the, just teasing Jenna, totally calling you out, girl.
It's in her purse right now.
right.
And I know Kathy's like, you will never really know the truth about me. I know you could just pull it out and pay it off. But most humans, right? Most Americans right now are complaining that they can't even afford the gas in their tank or milk off the shelf. They can't feed their families properly. So how do we expect them to get caught up into one of these wrap concepts and then most likely lose a property, right? Because they don't have the money to just say, hey, here, let's pay it off.
Is it automatic due on sale clause? Is that?
There is, and in 9 out of 10 deals, what I really should say, out of 99 out of 100 deals that we do, there is a due and sale clause in that note that they originally signed, and that's the problem.
I know you are not teaching us the wrap because we should not do it, but how we would be alert? Who started it? Like the buyer's agent, the listing agent?
Well, usually the listing agent is trying to be creative, but doesn't understand. And that's why it's important to have these conversations, that there is a difference between a carryback and a wrap. Usually it's not to do anything malicious, but they go, oh yeah, you can still hold the note. We don't have to pay it all off. And there are certain escrow companies that you can find that will almost insure anything. And it, not the good one.
Not the good one.
And because they're willing to take a risk, because they're like, what's the likelihood we'll be caught? When things like this shift and we have more money going through the government to refund groups like the CFPB and TRID laws being enforced and the other alphabet soups. I mean, the alphabet soups go on for years. It's funny because we always like, don't do that. That's against RESPA. And then we're like, how many people work for RESPA compliance? And they're like, 1 for the whole country. Am I really worried about RESPA when there's 1 person for the whole country? No, but when there's all of a sudden thousands of employees, you know, then you start worrying about the rule sets. So these are things that we just have to know that because of the 90s, it was very common. In the 80s, wraps and carrybacks really came out of those decades. And I mean, if you think about it, the students of the 80s in high school ruined it for people like me in the 90s because we were no longer allowed to leave campus. Yeah, I'm talking about all of you.
Not a fair statement.
No.
So the rule sets of what happened in the 80s and 90s with wraps ruined it for the 21st century because so many people stopped making their payments. Who was liable? Who a bank doesn't want to foreclose. Banks are not in the business to hold money. Banks are actually servicers. Banks make their money off how many accounts they can collect on, right? So that's why today when we go over carrybacks, what I want to teach you is that this is okay. This is something on a carryback that we need to understand. It means any notes, any liens on that property will be paid in full at close of escrow, that this seller will own this home free and clear as of close of escrow. And the bonus that I want to focus on, the real goodness of it, now that we went down all the ugliness and you all got mad at me and like, what did we ruin for you? You know what you ruined for me. I just can't say it when I'm being recorded. But I'm glad you enjoyed your years.
I certainly enjoyed high school.
I did too, by the way. I found my ways around the doors.
Just find your way around.
Now they like lock them and stuff. It's amazing. Where is it going? It's that a seller can finally use their home as an investment tool. A seller who's not looking to need that lump cash sum right away to utilize to buy another house, but just wants the money to maybe live out their golden years, or they need it to cover certain expenses and they were going to have to allocate the monthly anyways, are able to now make more money on the interest collected on the payments than they are on the stock market, the bond market, or any other investment market. I mean, we've heard for years, people like, oh, get a treasury note, and this is how it pays you over time. And it was like such a good interest rate, but we needed patience to collect that money. Ugh, that's why I don't have any treasury notes. We learn about IRAs and 401ks. I mean, if someone logs into their 401k now, today,
Don't do it.
they cry a little bit. Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
look.
I logged into
look.
mine
No, don't look, don't look.
and I said to myself, I have to remember, you keep putting in with faith and there's these compound effects, and I close my eyes and I'll relook in 5 years. You know what I mean? Like, you really have to believe in the instruments. But if someone wants to say, hey, I want an investment where I can make 6% on my money right now, this is where we do it. I was talking to my friend Susan Nicholson the other day. You all know Susan. She teaches here from time to time. She's one of my favorite humans. And if you ever see a CE class with Susan, definitely take it. I promise you will not be bored. And I said, I want to teach my agents 5 to 5.5% is a good rate on the people's money right now. And she goes, oh, Mandy, I could totally get them 6.5. I said, well, you can do whatever you want, Susan. You sell ice to Eskimos, so we're good. But she's right, because right now what we're seeing in the last quarter and the first quarter of 2023 is the scare tactics of the news, right? And everything that people put out, all this garbage, and then people like try to analyze the garbage and then they come up with something scary to tell us. And so they're saying we're going to get to 7.5%, 8% interest rates with people who have a basic FICO in the 6s. And have that really marginal debt to income ratio when purchasing. Does 8% affect someone's ability to buy?
Absolutely.
Okay. If they have 20% to put down, let's just say someone has 20% to put down, could that potentially get them a carryback note and pay off a seller's liens if they're minor? Yeah, they might be able to do it, right? Someone might only owe 50 grand on their house, right? And there's a lot of people who hold their assets over time. There's a lot of people who inherit houses that are free and clear. And wouldn't they like to make some money without being a landlord? How could I help you not be a landlord but have monthly income? Right? Because when that note changes, who cares if they repair something? Because you're not liable. You don't own the house. Right. And that's the scary part for a lot of people when they inherit properties is they're like, I don't want to be a landlord. Well, let's talk about a carryback option. Do you just want that income off that property? Let's change the conversations. So anything really below 6.5 right now is a steal for a buyer when it comes to a mortgage. For an 820 FICO with 20% down last week when I asked was at 7.5% interest on a par rate, which means 0 points. Right?
That was Friday. It wasn't Saturday.
Yeah. And what are they predicting right now, Jenna? When we look at the economists and they talk about the history of notes and when these things happen, what are we looking at in the second quarter of 2023 potentially? We're not there. We have no crystal ball, but what are we looking at?
That's
They
the
said,
hope.
they
Yeah.
said next year in the fall, it should be stable at 499. So refinance, if you are qualified now, get the house and then refinance.
So if you did over a 30-year note, amortize over 30 years at 6.5% and give someone a 5-year balloon payment, but give them no prepayment penalty. And when rates change, they have the option to refinance the property and get you off their note and hold a typical mortgage. Wouldn't that be a plus for everybody? And giving someone that kind of time isn't, according to what they're saying, meaning the powers that be that speak to us through the news channels and have the power of the numbers, wouldn't that be good for a seller and a buyer? Right? Eventually you're going to get your money, all the money that was guaranteed to you. You don't have to maintain a property and you're going to get a monthly revenue. And if someone stops paying you that monthly revenue, you're going to hire an attorney and you're going to have the option to foreclose and get that asset back and resell it. So you potentially can make more money.
So who does the loan paperwork?
Wow.
And what is escrow? I mean, what is the contract to escrow? Instructions.
It's my instruction.
Okay.
So I want to teach you how to make the instructions. So you have 3 documents in front of you. The first one I want to go over.
We don't know which. is-
I'll show you. What you're gonna do is turn to page 2. And page 2 should start at the top, seller financing. The first one you want has, I'm sorry, are you doing okay? The word only one underlined.
Wait, where are you at? There's 3 documents.
I know, we want the
Only
first,
one. Yeah.
so it's the one document that has only one.
This one.
What I want you to know, this is the one that you should be most commonly using. We don't typically, if you represent an investor, we cannot represent someone on a residential purchase to write a carryback without an attorney involved because there's loan originations, rules that they need to follow. So we can help someone with 3 or less properties they're doing a carryback for, or only one. Typically, most humans would be only one. Okay, so this is the most common. The next one, so just put this one to the side for a minute and know that this is the one we're going to go back to and work on today. The next one that you are going to see is there's one that says 3 or fewer. That's that one. 3 or fewer. Again, 3 or fewer properties. We do, if it's their 4th carryback that they're holding, we're referring them to an attorney. Reason being, if you look at this disclosure up front, you need a mortgage license to start financing and giving loans. Okay, I can't help you unless you're an actual mortgage officer with another carryback once you hit 4. Does that make sense?
Mindy, sorry to interrupt.
You're good.
You are talking as you are representing the seller?
Mhm.
Okay.
I mean, because you're the one that would advertise the carryback.
Okay.
I do expect the fact that the buyer's agent will attempt to fill something out and that you will counter with it filled out properly. Not that I don't have faith. I think like seriously, only 1 in 30 agents, like that ratio, actually understands the whole terminology of carryback.
Yeah, when you are talking right now, I'm too scared.
Don't be scared. Don't be scared.
I have to memorize the whole thing.
Yeah,
Go
well,
back
and-
to my book.
And you need to read it very,
Yeah.
very specifically.
That's why I
Oh,
wrote it.
And let's talk about vacant land. Okay, the 2 that I just had you look at is for single family detached homes. Okay, they're for single family homes. Vacant land, sorry, and thank you,
This is the first
is
thing.
the non-consumer credit transaction.
So what do I write on this one? What was your second one?
That-
That was the most common.
This one is,
This is the one we're on, right?
Three.
Through 3 or less. Seller financing addendum, non-consumer credit. So this one's actually common as well. This one's used mostly, I see, with vacant land. People want to do a carryback. They usually do own land free and clear because there's not many loans on vacant land unless it's a new home build construction. So this one's very commonly used for vacant land. So do not use only one residential home. I need you to always read the headers. You're looking for non-consumer. Okay? And always, always have your client, when they're the seller especially, read the disclosure statement on page 1 of all of these documents. Because the disclosures say exactly what it could be used for. So this one is when we're on that non-consumer one, credit extended in which the transaction is not secured by an owner occupied dwelling. So if an investor is buying it to rent it out, this would also be a non-consumer credit transaction. But if you're buying it, which is typically where we see carrybacks, I want to buy the home to live in the home. I can't get this traditional mortgage right now. It's outside of my budget. You're able to get that home free and clear. Can I just pay you as the bank for the next 5 years guaranteed with no prepayment penalty and amortize it over 30 years and give you the interest? Because let's think about it, guys. When you amortize something, what do you pay for the first like 10 years?
Interest.
So they still owe that full balance. It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy how much people actually have made through the years doing carrybacks and foreclosing on people. The other thing is the servicing company is extremely important to remove you from the equation, seller. Because when a seller collects their own money, what you're going to see is they're kind of like a landlord who should never have been a landlord, like me. Like, I'm really good working for other people, but when I work for myself and you give me a sob story, I let it go. And if I keep eating into your sob story every month, what did I just do? I rewrote the lease because I changed what you were able to do, and you can prove it through my actions of the past 3 months. Right? So we want our seller to remove themselves still, because when they do these, if they start acting like a landlord mentality of collecting the notes and not staying to the law, they might not have the ability to foreclose when they think they do.
Does everyone know what a servicing company is?
Everything company is that or?
No. So there are companies that will collect the funds each month. The money is sent to them, and then they process it and cut it back out to the seller. So the buyer pays the servicing company cuts the check to the seller or does the direct deposit. They also keep all the records of the interest paid, if anything is late, where they're at in the loan, et cetera. So if there is a foreclosure, they can print out the information, give it to you to take to your foreclosure attorney. Otherwise, if you're the seller and you're doing that on your own and you bought into the sob story and rewrote your lease, you're going to have trouble in a foreclosure court. Servicing companies are very, 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 very important. They charge a fee each month to do this. It's part of the loan that we put everything in place, but very, very important for your sellers.
So do you have, if you're a seller,
Mhm.
I'm just thinking of myself way back as I did this on both sides. When I bought, we did a carryback with a small balloon payment. That was fine, went smooth. And then when I sold, I did a carryback for the buyer, and they stopped making the payments. Buyers stopped making payments. So in the end, we had I can't remember how long the term was, 2 years or something. And there was a balloon payment. Title company reached out to me and said, hey, what do you want to do here? And I said, well, if this person does not pay me everything they owe, I'm taking the property back. But I didn't have an attorney. I don't think I had the money for an attorney. I was just young, I was a kid. So it's like.
I know, empty threats,
And
right? And it
gal,
scares some people.
She reached out to me and said, hey, I didn't have, why didn't you pay me? Why didn't you pay the title company? And I just said, look, she goes, how much can I pay you? And I go, what's due? She goes, well, can I pay you this? And I said, no. She goes, that's all I have. I go, then I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to take the property back. And she paid me the full amount.
See, that's the thing, is that like in goodwill of trying to help people, especially in these kind of scenarios, it's so heavy. And now that you're a real estate professional though, Dave, you always have to know to stay in your lane, right? And foreclosure is not our lane. Now, as the owner, you can threaten whatever you want, and the title company escrow company can't move forward without mutual agreement from both parties. So you're saying, I'm not budging unless you can pay the whole thing. Escrow's like, I'm just trying to process a deal.
Right.
And as the seller, as the party, you said no. Now, to actually perform on your threat, you would have probably needed legal assistance or to go down to the courthouse and do a lot of reading back then.
And most likely in the note, it usually depends on the instruction, says that a late payment has a late charge of X and the payment will not be accepted without everything what is due to be deposited with the company. So you can't make partial payments. Like, well, I can only give you $5, but I owe you 500. Right. So it continues to be late. And then there's other ramifications from there, depending upon what is in the note.
Okay, so we're gonna fill this out now. You guys ready?
Which one?
We are gonna go back to the most commonly used, seller providing financing for only one residential, okay? And then your homework will be to understand all of them, but if I could at least just get you to understand the two. The first one we go over in the non-consumer credit. And just to practice doing the math, on your own and letting me know one-on-one. Happy to go over it with you. Anytime this comes up, I do not expect you to be an expert. I expect you just to call and ask more questions. Because it is like you said, Jenna, it's a lot. And we have to give proper instructions. I am not okay with ever pushing anything off to an escrow officer to try to figure out without instructions from the buyer and the seller. And that comes through us. Okay. A lot of companies that will escrow will figure it out. And poor Susan goes, that's not nice.
Well, and the thing is, your escrow officer should never figure it out because it's not for me to make the decision. So if there is something missing off of the instruction to me, I will be in touch to get the answer from you.
Okay. So lines 1 through 4, does everybody understand that? Thank you. It matches your contract. I appreciate you. The only thing is some agents, and I know everyone means well, and here's the thing, when we start writing offers, does it get like really heavy in our head sometimes, like really, you start going every which way and you're like, wait a minute, the date is simply when you're writing it. Okay, it has nothing to do with actually the mutual agreement. That's when everybody signs it. So lines 7 through 13 are extremely important. 7 through 13 is a seller verification that the seller is a real person. The seller is providing consumer financing for only one residential property in a 12-month period. Seller owns the property, securing the financing, meaning the seller is the owner and they're going to be doing the financing. And seller has not constructed or acted as a contractor for the construction of a residence on the property as part of their ordinary course of business. Because if they are the builder, this is not the carryback form for them. Okay. If they are the builder, they have a whole nother level of disclosures and information and stuff they have to do. Okay. Buyer verification. Buyer is a real person. And they're going to be dwelling in the property for personal, family, or household purposes of the expectation of occupying it for more than 14 days for the coming year, which means it's an owner occupied or it's a second home. It is not an investment purpose. Okay, so it's not an Airbnb. We all get that? Okay. The following amount shall be financed by the seller and paid by the buyer. This is where I want you to write the words sales price minus down payment. If you don't feel included, please tell me and we can just speak.
You just tell me if you put my 2 cents in.
The reason I'm saying this is so many people, because when you're going through it, you go, oh my gosh, and you start lining a thing up and they'll put the full sales price here. And it's not the sales price, it's the finance amount. You know how we have 300,000 new conventional loan, but the actual sales price was 450. This is where that 300,000 would go, but now it's a carryback. Lien position most of the time is going to be first. If we're representing a seller, we want to be in first position. If they were obtaining a mortgage for partial amount of the property. So they're like, well, I'm going to finance 150, but then you're going to carry 150. The seller will end up in second position. The person with the note in second position cannot foreclose. And if the first one forecloses, the second is left hung out to dry. They have no recourse typically. So it's not in the seller's best interest to ever be in second position. And if they're getting any kind of financing through a bank, the bank will not take second position unless it's like a HELOC or they're set up. And what you'll see in those HELOC loans and other things is they will have personal garnishment concepts. They will have other ways to get their money.
So if it is second, would you maybe recommend that they not do this? Would you think they not? Okay.
And I would send them to an attorney or a tax accountant or a financial advisor. I would say, in my opinion, on what I know in my lane, that this might not be the best option for you because you don't have the power of foreclosure, which is everything you want on this asset. So I'm going to need you to speak to somebody else before making this decision. Here's some great sources.
Okay.
I love that you asked these questions, Eliana, and I'm glad that you came today. Type of financing instrument shall always typically be a promissory note or a deed of trust. We do deeds of trust typically, and that first box should be marked. I don't even know what you'd mark in the other box, like I have no concept of that. I always do a deed of trust.
A dozen cookies every week for the rest of my life.
I'm glad your joke was way more innocent than my joke. See, that improv is still in my head.
I had to be careful.
Okay, so can you tell us a little bit, Susan, on what goes into creating that deed of trust?
So I take this instruction that you give me that has all of the information on there, and we go through, and you're going to tell me if there's going to be a due on sell clause, that you're going to tell me what the default rate is. You're going to tell me if there is a late charge. You're going to tell me. So there's lots and lots of things you're going to tell me. And then yes.
Well, it's about to be on page 2.
It's about to be on page 2.
Yeah, you're gonna be okay. I
So
promise.
many times we'll get these and they're not filled out all the way.
And
And
these
so
are things that we talk to them about.
that's absolutely it. So you're going to give all this information to me, and then I'm going to build the document. I'm going to build the note. I'm going to build the deed of trust. And, the buyer is going to sign the note. I always put an approval line for my seller to sign the note. And then we're going to record that deed of trust, just like we would record a normal deed of trust that came from a regular lender.
Cool. And then the next section is, so everybody understands 22 should be the one always marked, not other. 25 is that interest rate we talked about. It cannot be under our watch an adjustable interest rate. If it's an adjustable interest rate, which is the big box underneath, we need to send them to an attorney, a financial loan originator. The thing is, we don't watch, and either does the servicing company, the US Treasury Securities or the LIBOR, which is where our arms come in play. If you want to look more into adjustable rate mortgage concepts, please Google the LIBOR and just look at it. It is based out of the UK. London. Thank you. That's what it is. The
Yeah,
London.
LIBOR is an acronym.
Yeah.
I forget what.
And
it
it's all
stands for.
about
Yeah.
London. And then the US Treasury Securities is what it says, but usually everything anymore is off the LIBOR, which is really interesting. But we don't do it. We're doing fixed and fixed only. So you want to make 6% on your money? Cool. Put 6% here. So why don't you guys just use 6% for today's term? So just put 6%, and we're going to play a game called figuring the answers out. And then line 19, we're going to pretend that we're carrying 350,000. So next to your words, if you just want, for example purposes, to put 350,000, we're really going to do math today. So where you put that, just put 350. So that way, when you figure out your, when you look back at this later, you go, how did I do that? You'll know what we did it.
I missed that. Where we put 350?
Somewhere near line 19, where I told you to put the words. Sales price minus down payment. We're going to pretend we're going to carry 350,000 with a deed of trust at 6%.
So that, on top of that, there's a down payment of the 350.
No, the down payment would have been on the sales contract. We're just pretending we're financing 350. But I like where you're going, Carla. They're like, wait, Mandy, wait.
Yeah.
So the sales price minus the down payment equals $350,000. When we're on line 31, I see agents trying to get creative all the time. They're like, 15 years. Why? Oh, you're torturing everybody. I get 15-year mortgages are cool because the concept of paying things off, but I would rather, as a human being, and I think it's more fair and safe to say, if you want someone to make their payments, unless they really want to do it, is give someone the option to pay as often as they would like to pay. So you can pay one extra loan payment, I think every 2 months, you pay it off just as fast. And you're not stressed to go, okay, this is only amortized over 15 years. Because when it's only amortized over 15 years, I mean, think of your car note. You were like 15 grand. And then mentally as a realtor, I'm like 30 years. And then they're like 5 years. And I'm like, never mind. So here we're going to write over 30 years. So line 31, put on the next page, Michael. On line 31, put 30 years. You put them all in a pile. I am going to help you and solve these. One moment, please.
My head goes really red.
No, you're fantastic. Give me that.
Like the only one, everyone else is just like, we're here.
No, you're fine. It's how I'm doing it. It's not, you're with me. I'm gonna give you the rest of your papers back later.
31. What do we put in there?
30,
30.
30 years. And it says not to exceed. So we can't do like a 50-year amortized. That's just not fair either. The unpaid balance is due before. So today is October 2022. And let's say we close November 15th, 2022, which would typically in a regular mortgage, just let you know, push it out until January 1st, 2023 for the note to be due. Do you know that? So if we
Yeah.
close in November, the first mortgage payment typically is not due until after the following month. So that would be January 2023. So here, don't put that yet, guys, because the unpaid balance is due on or before. This is our 5-year balloon payment, January 31st, 2028.
The unpaid balances.
Or should, do you want me to do January 1st? It's fine. We're gonna do 31st. January 31st, 2028, because that's 5 years after that first payment is due. Does that make sense? So this is my balloon payment. So I'm going to amortize you over 30 years, which is lovely. That's calculation. But the whole note will be due and payable no later than 5 years from your first payment, which is the end of January 2028. Now, you could be really specific and put January 1st, 2028. I prefer to put January 31st. I'm just like, give them the month. Like they already paid me for 5
And I will
years.
tell you, most of the time, it's 5 years from the close of escrow.
Okay, but I always do it
Yeah.
from the first
No,
payment.
So is it always like 60 days from whatever? the
Oh,
close is?
so-
November happened to be January, so if it's January.
It'd be
it'd
March 1st.
Okay.
Yep, but it's up
Six-
to the buyer and seller when that note's truly going to be due and when their first payment starts.
Mhm.
But if you're gonna be a traditional mortgage banker, I mean, or a carry note, or you're the one doing the financing, and this is typically how it works in the world of mortgage, because you're gonna prepay some interest and things at closing as the buyer, right? Then typically your note wouldn't be due until that following month. So we don't typically close November 15th and then have a mortgage payment December 1st. We pay the interest for December typically, but our first note isn't due until January 1st. That's why when you represent someone renting and they say, my rental ends, I can put my 30-day notice in January 1 and be out by the end of January. Well, then it's safe to say they can close in December and they won't have an overlap of payment, because they won't have their first payment then until February 1st. But if we close in November, they have an overlap of payment in January. Does that all make sense? And to Susan's point, you went.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, at closing, we're, with the normal or any loan, we're going to collect interest from the close of escrow to the first of the next month. And then so we collect that for the following month. Everybody,
Like the before.
yes, it's prepaid interest.
And that's why it goes out. And we can write that in here and you're going to see where in a minute. So our next thing is, now Ileana was like, I got Google, Mandy. I don't need a mortgage calculator. And I just want you all to know you all have Google, and you don't need a mortgage calculator. Okay, cool.
Oh, on our websites, right? Like.
Do you? That's lovely. If you added it, yeah,
Oh,
you
I
can
did.
delete it. Okay. See, everyone's a little different. You all can decide on your widgets. Bree, it was so good to see you. I'll catch up with you later if that's okay.
Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Good fall colors today, Bree. Bree, your coffee.
Well, I work on.
I don't want, yeah, don't be depressed. Have your caffeine. Okay, so what I said to you guys was that we have a $350,000 loan amount, right? So I have a little mortgage calculator. So I put in 350,000 and I hit loan amount. Then I put 30 years and I put term. And then we did it at 6% interest. Your actual payment would equal. So that way you guys, you can always practice this later, but I'm going to tell you what your actual payment on line 33 would be. $2,098.43. So later, when you practice this worksheet on your own, you should come up with $2,098.43. The next thing I am going to recommend is that on line 34, I click will, the first box. It will have an impound account. How else, as the owner, will I know the taxes are being paid and the insurance is being paid and any kind of assessments are being paid? How will I know that unless it's built in? That's why FHA loans, VA loans, and any conventional loans under 20% down payment all require an impound account. Same thing here, impound account. I, as a seller, want to feel secure that you're paying the taxes, because can that become a lien on the property?
Yes.
And can that affect me if I need to foreclose on it? Yep. So I want to make sure that's all taken care of. So I'm going to put will. Please note, I do not calculate anything further here. If I was representing a buyer, I would simply say, I need you to gather information in your due diligence period, which is already covered under section 6A of the contract, on homeowners insurance quotes. I also need you to look at the tax records. Here you go. Off Monsoon, and see where the taxes are, knowing that they're going to increase over time. So your payment's going to be bumped slightly over time. Right?
Yeah, but monsoon taxes are always on what they have as the current value.
They're
That's what everything's always prorated on anyway, or calculated on.
Mhm. So it's based
Oh,
on
so
that.
Really, so when you calculate.
When
you
I
still use the
calculate it, I'm
monsoon.
using, well, I'm not using, I'm.
We pull from Maricopa.
Maricopa, the assessor,
Okay,
and I pull the information that is current. And that is how we
how you started.
calculate
That's why there's
it.
always an adjustment after the first year. Okay.
Yep, exactly,
All right.
because taxes are also always paid in arrears, so you're always being paid, you're paying in
Gotcha.
reverse.
Okay.
So they're actually extremely accurate, but you just might as well tell them they're going up. Even when you think they're going down, they're going up.
They don't go down.
Now, how did you calculate it? I'm sorry.
It was based on 30 years, 6% interest at 350,000, and I used my handy dandy mortgage calculator.
Where did you get that? I need one of those.
This is sold at Amazon. It's also sold at all the realtor stores, and you can actually download the app on your phone. You can download the app on your phone, or you use your handy dandy website. Did your handy dandy website give you the same amount, which is free? There's a lot more a mortgage calculator can actually do for you. I can do an interest only payment. Guys, Google does all this for you now, but you have to remember, I learned carrybacks and wraps when I first started in 2003.
That is why.
We had to make our own forms. We had to write our own instruction. We had no formal form. These forms did not come out until 2014. We've only had these forms for 8 years. And we only had these forms created because when TRID guidelines came into place in 2014, they said, we're going to throw rules at everything. And then they defunded them. And now they're refunding them. So that's where we are so far. Payment intervals. The first payment is due. This is where we would put January 1st, 2023.
What line are we on?
We are on line 37.
And what is it?
January 1st, 2023.
January 30. Oh.
Yeah.
No, that's when your balloon payment was due and payable by. And this is just an example because this could be totally different based on what the buyer and the seller want.
Because there are times where, say, the seller says, I want to collect X amount of payments up front. So say that I'm going to collect 3 months up front. That's in addition to your down payment. And then your payment is going to begin, which would be 4 months from
Yeah,
now.
April.
So that's why that line is, when is it going to begin? Because there are all kinds of different, decisions made on what's going to work for the buyer and the seller.
Yep. Such a good point. The next I'm going to mark monthly.
I'm sorry, can we go back to the balloon payment?
Line 32.
Yeah, would that be, the whole balance is due, or do they have to refinance or finance?
If they refinance, it's the exact same thing because they're paying the first off, but the whole balance is due by X date.
I'm sorry, what does it do on the 30, line 32? Because it's for 30 years and then the balloon payment.
Amortized over 30 years. So the
Oh.
interest and payment has been calculated. They use that 30-year term of the loan, but the loan is only going to be carried for 5 years. So
Okay.
at the end of 5 years, they have to either just pay it all off or refinance it and get a regular loan.
So the whole point of that is if they are not qualified financially to get a loan, to give them that period grace. And the seller will carry it until they fix their situation, whether they paid off or get a loan.
And when you amortize it over the 30-year period, the payment is smaller.
Right.
Because if I'm going to have a $350,000 loan amortized over 5 years,
The total is $6,766.48 a
so
month,
it triples.
Wow.
which is why my car note is never what I imagine it to be. Because I'm stuck in house world.
30.
I'm like, what's wrong with you people?
Can we finance that for 30 years?
I'm like, I just want to pay you $75 a month. All right. Late payments. I always say yes. If yes, any late payment is at least, you can mark 10 days or blank. I usually do or blank. I say 5 days past due. Because I'm a little less lenient than the world. So line 40, I'd mark the box and put 5 days, a late fee of $25 percentage, but I usually wrote $25 a day, but I used it kind of like I used to do my property management, because I used to charge a late fee of $25 a day after the 3rd day, so I actually give them an extra 2 days. And so that's just kind of where I am. If you look at your mortgage now, typically you guys will notice that if we're more than 10 days late, they actually add a percentage onto our monthly payment that we owe them. We're just never late, right? I'll charge my mortgage before I'm late on my mortgage. I'll take that house. Thank you. So these are things to think about. These are things you need to ask the seller. Okay, but that's what I'm like, I would charge this, but you could charge whatever you want.
So Mandy, can I speak to this real quick? Because I don't know if it comes down. So a lot of times there will be a late payment. So you're 5 days late, and then there's a late payment of $50 on that late for being late. And then
If
If you-
25 per day.
I mean, I write 25 a
it
day.
depends. It depends. So say there was just
You're
a
more late.
$50 late payment if you're late. Then if you go to 31 days, many times there is a default rate, which would add like 5% to your mortgage percentage. So you're instead of paying 6%, you would now be paying 11% until it becomes paid and caught up.
I would say pay the 50.
It's a default rate. And that is one of the questions that if you sent this to me, I would call you and say, okay, is there going to be a default rate if they go to 31 days?
Is that common or, okay, all right.
Is that in here or how do we add that?
Well, hang on. No, well, she's saying that that's great. That these are things we don't go over
No.
in detail.
Okay.
These are things we're teaching you that this is why you're here. You're asking these questions. We're filling out this form, but our seller needs to get legal advice. The buyer needs to get legal advice, period.
So we discussed that ahead of time.
Always.
So when it happened, they know what to do. They don't go back to us because we.
We would send them to an attorney, right?
Okay.
And then the next section is line 42, which is the unpaid balance. If this is not paid in full by the line on 32, then there is a per diem fee. So if you don't pay your balloon payment on time, I'm going to make this painful. I'm going to make this painful because I want my money if I represent the seller. Maybe it's $100 a day.
Sounds good.
I mean, you got to think of post-possession. Don't we make it a little painful when they don't leave on time? Because we want them to leave. For me, I said $100 a day.
I
But-
just did one last week that was $100 a day if the balloon payment's not paid.
But you have to remember, it is up to that seller.
It is.
It is up to the buyer. I'm gonna say, make it painful enough that they won't be late. You know, and don't have a owner like Dave. Just teasing.
I was too nice.
No, you were perfect and you won. Account servicing is your next section, 44 through 50. Account servicing fees shall be paid by what you need to know. There's monthly fees and there's setup fees. Okay. I am going to mark typically the boxes that are blank and I'm going to put 50-50. Usually the buyers and sellers are willing to split these fees in half. Sometimes,
Do others and you say seller and buyer 50/50 or what
Mhm.
you do? check both?
yeah, you check that blank box in front of you there. And then you put 50-50 between buyer and seller. Or sometimes the buyer is like, look, I'm paying my mortgage on time. You're the one that wants the servicer, even though it helps the borrower as well. sellers pay the monthly maintenance fees. But typically I see more than not them split in half on both. Just like it benefits us both. Account to be serviced by, I really, really suggest if you represent the seller that they've already researched who they want this service by, so we can deal with it in the negotiation process of the contract. Because when it says to be determined, guys, that is not a true meeting of the minds. All right, I get that all of it's to be determined in some ways, but I really suggest a buyer start making phone calls or a seller start making phone calls and figure out who they want to be using, and counter as such, because this is part of the contract negotiations. Anything we have to be determined on is not a meeting of the minds, so could be proven by an attorney of an invalid, unenforceable contract.
So at that point, we ask the seller to do the research and the buyer to also do the research.
Oh, well, it
And
depends who you rep.
How
Yeah.
do we mark it on here?
I'm gonna write down who they tell me to write down.
Mandy, can I ask you, what was this one for? So for the account servicing,
They're
That's
both,
50/50, both of them were?
both are.
Okay.
but I'm just saying, sometimes you see where a buyer's like, seller, can't you eat it since I'm paying my mortgage payment?
Oh, okay.
Now, if you represent a seller and we're going down this advertising way, Susan will send you all later, a servicing company she recommends out. But it's not for us to do more than recommend it. It's for them to call and ask all the questions, okay?
I will actually send you a list of 4.
She'll send you a list of 4. And do you guys really believe in the rule of 3?
Yeah.
Always refer out 3. Please stop. Unless you have experience with all 3, do not refer out 3 at any time. If you only have experience with 1, you refer out 1 and you say very simply, please research them for what is important to you and feel free to use Google. The rule of 3 came from when I started as a receptionist and we used the yellow pages and the fax machine. And then, but it's changed, right? And so Susan does have experience with 4. And since Susan has experience with those 4, you can say, hey, this comes from my escrow officer. Please research them for what's important to you. But we stop there. And remember, in your ER agreement, it actually says that's your listing agreement. It has a big bold paragraph that says recommendations. And it says it's up to you to research who I'm recommending. Okay, I'm going to give you recommendations, up to you to call them and ask the right questions. So that's why we need this fully filled out. Does that make sense? If you receive this as a seller from a buyer's agent, it's all to be determined. You can use my desk mic. And it all says to be determined. Well, then we have a problem, right? So what are we going to do? We're going to counter it with what the seller wants. We don't have a problem. We have the control. We're going to counter it with what the seller wants. We're not going to create an addendum. We are going to create a counter, because a meeting of the minds is with a counter. An addendum is an optional item. Everybody good? Sweet. Line 53 through 56. I really, 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 really recommend it. Says is. I want to know if you truly qualify, how you qualify, what is on your credit. If I get someone's credit as a seller and none of their utilities have ever been on time, and that's the only time utility companies actually put anything on your credit, they never put anything positive. How good am I going to feel about you paying your mortgage payment if you can't pay APS? I'm just saying, like, if
But can this whole deal blow up if they had like some kind of blemish, you know?
It can depend upon the seller.
But isn't that why you'd want to do this? Because you have somebody in a situation where they can't just go to the,
well, maybe they have so many medical bills, right?
right?
That usually medical bills don't really mess with your FICO so much, but they have so much outstanding medical debt that they're working on, they don't qualify, but nothing else is showing negative, right? Their car payment's paid, this is paid, this is paid. I mean, how many of you have ever received something 6 months later that they claim
Yeah.
that they sent you a bill and you're like, if I had the bill, I'd have paid the bill, but I
Yeah.
never had the bill. But now I'm in collections. So if I'm going in collections for $48, you can just keep the $48 in collections because you have pissed me off. You know what I mean? Like, we've all been there, done that, right? And then some people have these catastrophes that they're working on. But it's reporting, but their car payment's paid, their APS is paid, their water's paid. Because if you don't pay your electric and your water, my home will not be maintained when I foreclose on it, because these are things that actually affect the suitability of the house.
Right.
In 120-degree weather, if you have no AC, we all know it bubbles. Bubbles and boils are only good for October. What month is this? October. So this is saying that they will provide a loan application, which is found online, and that they will provide their credit score as well. If they ask for them to pull the credit report, that's fine. The seller can ask the buyer, pull it and provide it. Like, they can go to Experian and pull a free one. by the way, for themselves. Or they give permission to the seller to pull their credit, which they can do through one of those rental websites on the applications. And I have Easy Rental, Easy Landlord. Landlord.com is one that they can set up their own account and pull people's credit. And they can deny them within 3 days of receiving it. It says here, okay, so they can pull, this could all go to heck. But wouldn't we rather have it go to heck now than after closing?
Yeah,
Because who gets blamed no matter what happens?
we do.
All right. Due on sale, the unpaid balance, including accrued interest, fees, and penalties, is immediately due and payable in the event that the premise is sold, transferred, or conveyed in any manner. Exact same clause that's in all those mortgage notes. So you can't wrap me. Just because my name's Mandy and I am now the financial institution, you ain't wrapping me either. I have the right to call it due on sale. So that's exactly what that is. Buyer liability is that they understand that they need to get their own legal representation or advice, that they're releasing us, and they need to understand that they have to pay their HOAs, utility bills, and independent counsel shall be discussed with. Our lane is to write what they want us to write. It's their job to investigate how this affects them, okay? Title insurance. Buyer shall furnish the seller title insurance, just like in a regular deal. Tax service.
Except for the fact that it is a standard policy, not an extended policy, which your institutional lenders require.
But it is title insurance.
It is absolutely title insurance.
So we're not doing this on the side and just like recording it down at the county. We're going through title still. Tax service. I instructed you all in this example to have an impound account. That was the 112. Smartest thing ever. If there is no impound account, then it's instructed that they shall have a tax servicer pay the taxes. Just have the impound account.
Some sellers will require both.
Yeah, and that's up to them to get legal counsel to do such. I will not advise them on this part, but I will advise them the best thing for my seller is to have an impound account. Hazard insurance, buyer understands that they're going to get insurance on the house. And then we go to our next page. Everybody okay so far?
And let me just say, when it comes to the hazard insurance, they will be required to provide an invoice for either paid in full for the year or an invoice to be paid at close of escrow for that year. We are going to pay that first full year of the hazard insurance, just like we do with an institutional loan. And then we will collect additional months to go into the impound account, just like one of your regular lenders out there.
So see, it's more than just saying 350.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
well, they might be carrying 350, but you know what? The seller also has to cover, right? So it's so important to make sure this down payment is that down payment has to cover all of our commissions, has to cover all of the, the closing costs they have to come in with. You have to think there's so much more than just saying 100,000 down. Okay, how much is this house? How much is this? How much is that? Because everything has to be included in that down payment, plus the closing costs. And the closing costs are buyer side closing costs, which is your insurances, your taxes, your proration, your escrow fee. That's all that is. But part of that down payment, the seller cost is commissions and taxes and any liens. So we have to make sure we really understand what the seller needs for that down payment before we agree to the carryback. Or guess who might be out of a commission?
Right, so put a net sheet together when we're presenting all this.
So
No, you're actually going to have title do it for you.
Oh.
And because it's so much more complicated. We're actually going to go a step further before we agree to a contract like this. And we're going to have title pull what's called the prelim to see if there's any outstanding liens we don't know about on the property. Because it's amazing to me how many sellers forget about silent seconds.
Yeah.
And a silent second sometimes needs to be paid in full, depending on how many years they've owned the home.
So if you're going to be doing a carryback, you're going to want to call me so that I can put a settlement state together so we can make sure that we know that down payment is going to cover everything. You're also going to need to find out from your seller if they have a deed of trust, how much they owe, because that's going to come into play right there. so many times we'll do a net sheet and we know that there's payment, payoff out there, but we don't know what it is. And we just run it and, this is how much you're going to get minus your payoff. When you're doing a carryback, we need to know.
Okay, everybody good? Next page, last page. You only have one form, so you're good. Just
This
flip
one
that
right here?
sucker over.
You only have one form. She took away your form. She took your forms.
I love you, that's why. Line 75 through 82 is basically an indemnification clause. It's an acknowledgement from the buyer and the seller that we are not financial advisors. I am not here to break down that credit for them. That's up to them to figure it out. And that's up to them to also follow federal and state laws. And to talk to qualified professionals, which are not your escrow officer or your agent. We guide you down the path that rocks to send you to other people that are qualified. All right. And then the buyer and the seller both initial that section. And additional terms is a big blank area. This is where you might say, if they're not paying in December, that escrow is instructed, or they are instructed to charge the interest for December upfront as a closing cost to the buyer. That way they delay that. This is where you might say anything else that comes out of the buyer or seller's mouth to make sure that they're on the same page. Okay, I will let you know that line 32 to me makes sense, that we went over that. That's a balloon payment line. That means everything's due and payable by this date. I am hugely against rewriting anything that's pre-printed for the same purpose. But I will tell you, a seller might ask you to specifically put that the buyer agrees to the balloon payment due date, which is listed on line 32, that they want to see that term balloon payment. Because they are like, where did the term go? This is the term. This is what is defined as. This is where, no, I want it stated. Okay, I will state, but I will refer back to the line numbers in which it should have been directed to. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And with that, guys, you have to stay positive. This is a great instrument. This is another way to have different conversations with our sellers, with our buyers. Great ways to help them, because just to let you know, and let's just do Scaryville on
Scaryville.
So how much I told you that the payment was 2,000 and some dollars, right? At 8%, it would have been 2568. So a mortgage would have been 2568. Let's just say, okay, that $500, could that make or break some people a month?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could 250 make or break some people a month? So sometimes this change, that 2% difference, that $500 difference, you're making someone's ability to own a home possible, and somebody else is able to collect that 6% on their money.
But when you're talking to them about that payment, you have to remember taxes and insurance are added on top of that.
Yep.
The impound, 1/12 of the tax year and 1/12 of the insurance year.
But those stay consistent on top, whereas that interest rate was that variable amount that we're trying to save. So I love that, because that right there is like $300, just plain out $300 at least, plus their HOA payment, right? So we want to make sure that everybody understands these numbers, but this is the difference between someone being able to survive with a mortgage payment and someone not being able to, while the seller has a direct benefit and a guarantee of money. So if the scary people of the world, the Will did it. He was poor Will. We gave him that chair at improv, and he had to be the mean one, the sarcastic
so
one.
good, Bob.
He was so
Oh, he's
perfect.
so
Yeah.
good
But he was like, well, why does it matter anyways? The market always sucks. It was just, and it's not true, Facebook, it doesn't suck. But it was just a play on words and concepts. But if you have that person in front of you, well, the market always goes up and down. It goes down, it goes up, it goes down more than it goes up, right? And you're like, and with this kind of carry, there is a consistent of you owe this, because you're now a bank and you're not an owner. So when you become the bank, they owe you X, period, right? So these are good benefits for any kind of mentality to overcome them, if the home is able to be paid in full. Yay! Okay. Facebook, we're done now. So it was great spending time with you today, and we can't wait to see you in the office. Share and leave meeting.